Great to have you along for the ride. Thanks a lot for stopping by. Really glad to have this guy back. He's a good, close, personal friend of mine. He's also a former prosecutor. He's a current criminal defense. Nico, is it criminal defense or just defense? I don't know how that works.
Criminal defense lawyer.
There you go. It's Nico LaHood. You can find out more about Nico over at LaHoodNorton.com. Good to see you, man. How are you?
I'm well. I'm blessed, Joe. Thank you. You look good.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. We're watching this case out of South Carolina. And this guy, Richard Alexander Murdaugh, and some say Murdoch, went by Alex or Alec Murdoch. He just found guilty of killing his wife and his son. And there's so much intrigue about this case. I know that you weren't watching every second of the case as it went on. But, I mean, there's so much death around this guy. The young lady died in a boat accident. Their housekeeper that they had for years and years, she dies falling up the stairs somehow. Some friend of his son dies in the middle of the street. And then, of course, his wife and his son were brutally murdered at their home. And this is a family story that for 100 years has been above reproach in this small area of South Carolina. Does that add to the intrigue? Were you watching it because all that was going on?
I got asked questions about it, and then my wife ended up finding out about it. So she watched some Netflix show on it, and we ended up talking about it on another show. And so I caught up on it. It is intrigued. I don't know if they were above reproach, Joe, or above accountability, because it seems like this guy got away with a lot of things leading up to it.
Yes.
My analysis going in was for me to look at the evidence as a former district attorney, as a current defense attorney, and I was making analysis of what I was seeing as the trial was going on. It was a fascinating trial. The guy's a fascinating individual, and this verdict is what I had told people in our office what we expected. I expected it to be a guilty, but you never know until the jury speaks.
Let's take it as a prosecutor. First of all, this family, they weren't only defense attorneys, which is weird, knowing that they were also the prosecutors in town. It was very strange. I don't know how that worked out for so long, but that's what they were. They were on both sides of the law the entire time, and they were all making money on both ends, which is weird. But as a prosecutor, you get a case like this, and does it matter that the family is well known? Does it matter that the guy is somebody who went to school with everybody who lives in town, or is it the evidence matters?
It's irrelevant theoretically because Lady Justice wears a blindfold. It matters when it comes to strategy of whether the government can get a fair trial. Defense has to do the same thing on whether there should be a change of venue. Obviously, both sides made that analysis and made the determination that they'd rather have a jury of their peers where actually he lived. But yes, it matters only from strategy, not from whether the law should be applied fairly and evenly to someone with a high profile like himself.
The defense that they tried to give, and it's Nico LaHood, go to LaHoodNorton.com. It is LaHoodNorton.com. That's the website, right?
LaHoodNorton.com, yes, sir.
Beautiful. Go there. He's a criminal defense attorney, former Bexar County DA here in the San Antonio area of Texas. When we're looking at the case, the defense allegedly was, yeah, I stole a bunch of money. Yep, I'm a drug addict. I'm not a really nice guy, and I lied, but I didn't kill anybody. I mean, Nico, is that a strategy?
Well, it is a strategy because when you have the rules of evidence are going to govern that. The judge is the referee, and the judge makes a determination on what evidence is presented by the government to a jury, and then the defense has to deal with that after pretrial motions, strategizing on what if this gets in, what if it stays out. Everybody's playing legal chess before you get into the arena, and so if all that stuff was going to come in, then you say, well, yeah, I'm a liar, I'm a cheater, and I'm a white collar financial crime. I've committed white collar financial crimes, but I'm absolutely not a murderer, and I would never murder my child and my wife. So there's a strategy because what you're trying to do is gain credibility with the jury by admitting to the things you can admit to that have really nothing to do with the allegation that he was accused of.
As a prosecutor, when you get the case, what's the strategy right up front? It's all circumstantial. They don't have any direct evidence, like eyewitness evidence, that he did this. And at the end of the day, they convicted him in like less than 3 hours. How do you, when you watched it unfold, did they do what you would have done exactly?
I don't know about exactly, but you piecemeal the case together. The way I describe it to people, it's having a puzzle, and all the puzzle pieces are like this. And then what the government does is try to put pieces together. Sometimes it's the state, it's the defense, that is trying to put pieces together because the government has the wrong picture. It just really depends. The strongest evidence against him, in my humble opinion, but I think it's accurate, was that video of his son where they were down at the kennel. When that came out, I said, when did they know about this video? I remember when I first found out about it. Didn't this guy tell the story for years and to multiple people, even people he was close to, convincingly that he was not even there? That was part of his alibi, is that I wasn't even there. And then now you have a piece of evidence that puts him there literally minutes before his family is murdered. I mean, to me, that was the dagger in the heart. I didn't believe when I first heard about it that they could overcome that. I was curious to hear him testify. I said right there, we talked about it in the office, he has to testify now. And he testified, and I don't think he did a very convincing job logically.
Right.
He performed well, but he's been a performer all his life. And I heard some commentators say they thought he did well. I didn't think he did well. I thought he showed that he was an opportunist and that he was a very good liar. And he talked the same way he did in these other circumstances where he was lying and they know he was lying. And to me, I just thought that was too much to overcome.
Former Bexar County DA Nico LaHood, he's also a criminal defense attorney now, LaHoodNorton.com. So I want to bring the video a little bit more to light. The video is a Snapchat video. Snapchat is an app, for those who don't know, on your phone where you can take short videos, send them to friends, you can store them on your phone, do whatever you want to do. He lied about it as long as you said he did, because they couldn't get into the son's phone. They eventually used the Secret Service of the United States to get into his phone and unlock it, and that's where they found this video. The video, and I think this is really important, in the video, you've got the kid playing with the dog, you got the mother making some commentary playing with the dog, you got Alex Murdaugh in the back, you know it's his voice, he had to admit it was him, talking about the dog and about what the dog's doing with the chickens or something else, and then moments later, Nico, when that video's over, he kills them both. What? I mean, at that point, if you're sitting on the jury, you've got to send them away, don't you?
Well, I mean, from what I don't know what the jury thought. I'd love to hear them. Hope they do interviews as time goes on, because I'd love to be a fly on the wall. But a 3-hour verdict on a 6-week trial tells you everything to me. When that verdict, when they got notification, they told us, hey, there's a verdict on that Murdaugh trial. I said guilty, 100% guilty. All of us knew it, because as former prosecutors on a case that long, we knew it was a guilty. And with the evidence that we saw, it was overwhelming to him. Yes, it was circumstantial, but it was such circumstantial evidence that it almost became direct evidence. And the jury seemed to have seen it that way as well.
My wife, Jenny, was watching this from day one, watched every hour, just watched all of it she possibly could. And her question was, and maybe you can go to the mentality of somebody like this guy, maybe you can't, but her question was, how do you do that after you were just playing with the dog and playing with the chicken and making jokes with your wife and son? How do you kill them both? Who is this person? Just a complete sociopath? Somebody who's disconnected from what's good versus what's evil?
Yeah, he's got a seared conscience, Joe, for sure. A depraved heart, we call it that. He's a reprobate beyond recognition. I mean, it's a horrible thing. Now, that could have been used two ways. If he was honest about being there before it happened, you say, listen to the way he was talking. How could you say it just the other way? How could someone do that? Have dinner with his family, talk about Bubba and a chicken in his mouth, talk nonchalantly about it, and then brutally murder his son and his wife moments later? There's no way he could do that. But he wasn't honest about it. And so that's how it was flipped around. I thought it was too much to overcome. I frankly, in my humble opinion, I thought that it sucked the air out of his defense counsel. His defense lawyer, and I really don't like doing this, so I'm objective about this. I don't like to play Monday morning quarterback, but I can't ignore what I saw. His defense counsel seemed discombobulated. He was kind of all over the place. From what I understand, he was close friends with that guy, Alex.
He is, yeah.
He was actually with him during one of his interviews or two of his interviews. I think that he felt betrayed. And this is me. I'm completely speculating, Joe.
Sure.
But he just seemed deflated. When you look at his closing arguments, he had to admit that I'm kind of random. I'm out there. He wasn't together. The prosecutor Waters, it was long. It was kind of, with all due respect, boring, but it was logical and it was timeline. The jury could follow it. The rebuttal closing from the other co-counsel on the state side, I thought brought that southern feeling. My mama taught me, and let me tell you, what's right is right, and that's real, and that's what's real. And he just had a very good, comfortable, common sense approach, logical. I thought he brought it home really good for the government, and I knew after that it was going to be a guilty. I just didn't know how long.
Former Bexar County DA Nico LaHood, he's now a criminal defense attorney, LaHoodNorton.com, great friend of mine. So as I'm watching this, and again, I'm not a murderer, so putting it together in my brain doesn't ever, it's not going to be rational ever. But you start to think about it and put the pieces together that we find out. He invites them both over. Turns out the wife had visited a lawyer, probably divorce is coming. They found out that he was doing drugs, and he invites them both to the house. They both decide, okay, let's go to the house. And they go there, and they're having a fine night. It turns out the invitation comes. He knows that the house is in his wife's name. Her will is altered that he becomes the beneficiary should she die. We also know that 2 separate guns were used. I mean, Nico, if I add all that up, and this is from watching crime dramas on TV, that seems extremely premeditated to me. Why do you switch guns as you're killing them?
You don't, to make it look like there was more than one shooter and he couldn't have done it by himself.
Yeah.
But he didn't think it through. I mean, when you talk about the GPS and pinging your phone and where you could be, and GSR, gunshot residue, and how that's prevalent on hands and clothes, and you can't control that all the time, how to clean it up. Timeline was going to be a big deal. So it's not as if, from my understanding, he knew that Paul, his son who's deceased, had that video. He didn't even know that video was there.
Had no idea.
I think it would have been a very different potential outcome, or at least a hell of a lot longer deliberation, if that video from the kennel wasn't there. I don't think he testifies. I don't think he needs to testify. He didn't have a choice but to testify, and he seemed to be such a narcissist, self-indulged, I don't know if I could say prick, but that's what he seems like it is, that he said, I can talk my way out of this one too. And he talked himself into it. I really believe he didn't do himself any favors, but he really didn't have a choice, Joe, at that point.
Well, it's such an interesting angle, because I always thought that it is a big detriment for the person accused of murder to take the stand. Had O.J. Simpson taken the stand, who, by the way, by the evidence did it, had he taken the stand, he would have been convicted easily, I think. The fact that he didn't, and then he faked that he couldn't put his hand into his own glove, I mean, that's what got him exonerated. If he takes the stand, he's done. So this guy taking the stand, you think that one piece of video forced it? You, as his defense attorney, would have made him take the stand?
I can't make him. A defense counsel can't make you. But what are you going to do? You have to explain it. You have to give it the old college try. When that came in, and I found out about that piece of evidence, knowing that he continually lied to his own defense counsel too, to his friends, family, business partners, people that vouched for him. Then he fakes his own attack or a suicide or whatever it was to get. I mean, this guy is constantly trying to get himself out of it. He's very opportunistic. He thinks he can sweet talk his way out of it. He uses emotion, and this was obviously very traumatic. Yeah. It worked for a little bit of time, but I mean, when I found out about that piece of evidence, Joe, he had no choice but to testify. But it was ultimately his choice. But he's just arrogant enough to think he could have pulled it off, and he sunk himself when he testified.
Nico, how does it work? I know your heart. You're a great man. You're somebody who believes in Jesus as your Lord and Savior. I know that you want right to overcome wrong. I get that. What if you get this guy come to you, ask you to defend him? I know that you believe that everybody deserves a defense, but what if you know in your heart that looks like he did it? What do you do?
Well, there's three aspects to justice. People ask me that. I was talking to someone earlier today, just a matter of fact, about that issue. As a Christian, how do you represent people? I go, well, man, Jesus deals with guilty people for a living, right? He's in the refurbishing business. I mean, I don't know anybody that goes to Jesus because they're innocent. We're all guilty. We're broken. Right. We have fallen short. But there's three aspects to justice based off our Constitution. Number one, is the government with all their power and resource that can get out of control, are they pointing at the right person? Number one. Number two, did they get there the right way? It's called due process. Fundamental fair play. If we are okay with the government getting to the quote-unquote bad people by cutting corners, then guess what? They can get to the good, innocent people by cutting corners.
Right.
So how they get there matters. And then number three, does the result match the accusation? Is it metered justice? We don't send people away for life in prison for stealing food out of necessity, right? That's not metered justice. So if you don't have all three aspects of justice, well, then you don't have justice. And so one of them is making sure the government can meet every element and making sure that they are held to their burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. And sometimes it's a slow plea. I don't believe that this defense team believed it was a slow plea. I think they really had a shot. I think, especially his friend Jim, or whatever the guy's name was, who did the closing, I think he was all in. I think he should have really prayed, if he was a man of faith, or thought about whether he should have been the trial team, because he's a witness. He actually was in some of these interviews. I think he may have been too close to it. And he just seemed to me, and I said it during when I watched the closing, I said, this guy seems deflated. Either he feels betrayed by him somehow, or he thinks that this evidence is overwhelming and he's not convinced of the defense himself.
It is and that's an amazing answer. It's Nico LaHood, LaHoodNorton.com. Go to that website. He also hosts a great radio show on the weekend, too. One last question, and I want to go back to him sitting on the stand. When he's on the stand, and I'm not a lawyer, so disagreeing with you doesn't do me very, very well, but I'm going to try a little bit. I think he convicts himself with the fake snot. And I don't know that it was fake snot that he shoved up his nose, but he's got snot coming out, and he's rubbing his eyes as hard as he can to try to make tears come out, and he couldn't really even make that happen. I think the histrionics and his acting on the stand hurt him exponentially. Do you agree with that or not?
You know, what I noticed when he was testifying, and I didn't see all of his because it was a long direct and cross and recross and redirect. But he was making that same same it was a very repetitive, and people do that when snot comes out of their nose. I get it but he didn't seem like he was crying.
Right.
It didn't seem real to me. Now look, I've seen a lot of people cry when they testify, when they're giving witness testimony, or when they're doing interviews. I get it. And there are people that are considered quote unquote ugly criers.
Yeah.
I don't know that there's a formula on how to cry. Everybody cries differently depending on the emotions they're dealing with and what they're crying about. Right. I get that, but it didn't seem genuine to me. It's easy to say now, but I was making these comments as some of the guys in the office were making comments as the case was going on. Again, I think it's worked for him in the past. I think it worked for him early on, but then over time, truth prevailed. I commend the government for being persistent and staying on top of this. And it looks like it was done properly. The jury heard all the evidence. I believe in our jury system. It's not perfect, but it's the best one out there. I want citizens making decision, not the government, and not any one person. I want your peers to make judgment. The only thing that I have, and I don't even know how this gets fixed, is if there was some type of gag order. Yeah. Because on a high-profile case like this, I very highly doubt. I want to believe the jury didn't look at anything outside for 6 weeks, but it's very doubtful.
Well, it would be hard not to watch the Netflix series, to be honest with you. Yeah. But that series seemed to be slanted towards Murdaugh, to be honest with you. Nico, give me maybe 10 seconds on this, just a quick answer. Does he win an appeal? Does he get to go and try this again or not?
I didn't see anything that was appealable. He's going to file an appeal. I don't know anything. I haven't heard any commentary saying that his constitutional rights or procedural rights based off state law were violated. And if they were, was it to a degree that would warrant an appeal? I doubt he's going to get any redress. We call relief on appeal, but he's going to try.
All right, Nico, I appreciate that. It's former Bexar County DA Nico LaHood, now criminal defense attorney, great talk show host, LaHoodNorton.com. Thank you, brother. I appreciate you.
Thanks, Joe. Have a blessed day.
All right, man. We're back after this. Stay right here.